artist really well, so this is very nice to have such an outpouring of love for you. My name is Amanda Murphy, and I'm the curator and the resident artist and collector liaison here at the Museum of Contemporary Art Arlington. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this talk with Marisa Stratton about You Will Never Be Forgotten. I will go ahead and read her bio, and then we'll launch into some questions. It's very much a dialogue type of conversation. And then at the end, we'll do Q&A. We are live on TikTok. Which will be one of the topics of conversation, I think, tonight.
Yes.
And we'll just
Yay.
Okay, so let's go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know you were going to read my bio.
Yes, I am. I'm an official girl. Get used to it. Okay, so Marisa Stratton is a painter whose work explores contemporary portraiture in the context of screens. Marisa holds a BFA in Communication Arts with a minor in painting and printmaking from Virginia Commonwealth University. She is shown in multiple group exhibitions, including Virginia MOCA in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Hamiltonian Artists in Washington, D.C., and the Delaware Contemporary in Wilmington, Delaware. Stratton has been featured in New American Painting and currently teaches at Georgetown University. All right, so many of the paintings in this exhibition are about the act of looking at people, and you position yourself literally at the very beginning and at the end with your profile picture looking at the viewer. And it seems to be there's this like cyclical conversation happening between you looking at people, looking back at you, and the cycle continues on and on. Can you talk about how that exists within this space, and then also how it has like maybe a parallel online?
Yes. I think I was very interested in this like boundary between surveillance and like a loving attention. I think as a painter, I feel like painting is an expression of attention. You're really like giving a lot of your time to an image, and these images they pass through our gaze so quickly. And I think painters are also very comfortable as the position of the observer. So we really like marinate in this like voyeurism sometimes. And social media allows for that so easily. So I think when I first started engaging with social media, I really it felt so indulgent because I love portraits. I mean, most of my work is portraiture. It's about people and representing them. And so when I was, when I first approached social media, it's a sea of faces, and I want to see more faces, so it produces like this infinite kind of database of people. So for me as a painter interested in representing people, it just felt like a guilty pleasure almost, like I could see through windows into people's homes, so it's a very interesting feeling, which I think painters are very used to embodying or exploring. So it's interesting to be in this cycle of viewing, the cycle of creation, which I then put back into the spaces that I'm kind of sourcing these images. So I was really interested in circles, and that's kind of a motif in the show. There are like these profile pictures, and then these wheels, paintings on the inside or the outside. And so thinking about the cycle of viewing and creation was also something I was considering, but it's interesting how I placed my profile picture kind of high above. Like I am surveilling, and the profile picture on the front wall is my Instagram profile picture, which is a drawing I made of my own eye. So I'm really interested in seeing and being the observer. And this show is pretty interesting too, because it's the first show where I'm more prominently inserted myself. So I'm beginning to not only observe people, but also bring myself into maybe less passive or something like that. So I think this cycle is something that painters deal with a lot and we are thinking about a lot. So it felt familiar and maybe a little, like I said, indulgent. I wanted this show to indulge in people and indulge in texture to kind of produce the same sensation when I was like approached with this very interesting experience. So, guilty pleasure.
I love it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the title of the show?
Yes.
You will
Okay.
never be forgotten.
You will never be forgotten. So this comes from, I brought my source material. This title came from this book, which is a book of short stories. They're kind of cyber horror stories almost. So the story from this book with the same title is about a woman who is a content moderator, and she is also cyber stalking someone. So it's like two storylines in which she is moderating like very gruesome content while also indulging in this like cyber stalking, I guess. So the story itself is very dark. And I think in her Marisa book, the phrase "you will never be forgotten" is kind of like this ominous threat almost. Like when you produce images online, they will never leave. And it's a very kind of threatening thought to some people. I don't think that's what people would think when they see this title in the context of my show, because I'm trying to kind of, you know, return to this sentiment of like, I want to remember you, I love you, I want to remember you. But it is funny that this title, when sent to some of my family members, they thought it was an obituary. So it's pretty interesting. I think my desire to capture people, you know, I want to preserve people, but it is also, I think this desire to preserve people is also a desire to preserve myself, and for myself to be remembered amongst this sea of images. So I think I like the phrase because it could be a threat, it could be a beautiful devotional statement, and it's also me like kind of hoping that I'm not lost either. So, and I think that's why I also placed myself here. And my name is invisible, because when I was planning this title, I was like, oh, I guess my name must be on the wall too. But that would literally read, "You will never be forgotten, Marisa Stratton." So I was like, I don't know about that. But I did place myself, because I am, you know, this desire comes from my own desire for revolution. So yes. And this text comes from this amazing movie, I Am Love. So this is the idea of kind of layering people in text also is coming from that image. And when I had a friend who saw this like arrangement and they thought of this is like a genre video on TikTok where there's Subway Surfers, which is a game, and some other maybe more serious content playing at the same time. So it's two channels of content to keep you invested in like what you're like the information you're receiving. So I was really interested in also like maybe producing some layering. Maybe I like that it's white as well because it's almost as if it's like emerging from the wall. So I like those kind of layers that we like engage with online to try and hold our attention as well. So yes.
I feel like one of the most striking things about this show is that you're engaging with a sphere that moves so fast.
Yes.
You know, images appear and disappear really, really quickly. But all of the pursuits that you seem to slow time, and maybe it's partially the medium that you've chosen. there's a slowness and a willingness to indulge and like a real sensuality to it. And sometimes I think the digital world is thought of as being very cold and sort of less than human, but you've somehow
Yes.
humanized it, in part, I think, through the medium you chose. So I wonder if you can talk about your pursuit of slowness, like you like to read, you like to work in oil paint, you like to work in things that are inherently kind of this slow time. And I know that in preparation for the show, we talked about how like you move at a different pace. You like to
Yes,
take
I'm
it
so
slow.
I'm always late.
So I just wonder if we can talk about that contrast and, you know, why maybe, and how that lives alongside this very fast world that you chose to be subject of.
Yes, I think it's interesting because painting is a slow, laborious process, but compared to other painters, I'm a pretty quick painter. Like I spend as few sessions as possible, but it's still hours and hours spending time producing an image. And I think when we encounter so many images on social media, there's no labor involved in retrieving them. Like they're kind of just brought to us, and we have to do a minimal amount of effort to engage with them. And so I think that removal of like physical labor, like people producing images, is also something I struggle with. I'm like, I think labor is very grounding. So, you know, when I'm painting, I feel like it very much grounds me to the world. It grounds me to my surroundings. And I think that's just a, you know, kind of slower way of thinking about kind of the world as well as we move closer to kind of valuing convenience over many other things. And I think sometimes convenience is not very interesting. So I think painting is also a way to really construct my world, construct my space, and it changes the way I interact with these images once I paint them.
I'm also thinking,
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about how all of these are screen grabs, right?
Yes.
So how does that work? I mean, is it just like, something about this is interesting, screen grab? Do you study that image before you paint it, or are you figuring out what makes something compelling as you make it?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. I think I follow my impulses and I'm like, oh, this is a striking image, so I save it for some reason that maybe I don't know. Or what is being said by the person is so interesting and I want to like have a hold on that sentiment or something. So it's a little bit of both. Some images I spend a lot of time with, like in their immediate form, and other times I spend more time painting than I do, like, you know, actually, you know, I'm not replaying the TikTok over and over again while I paint it. Though that would be a cool, you know, maybe I'll try that next. Then maybe I'll paint TikTok. Yeah, I think there are a lot of formal things I desire, like as a painter. Like lighting is important to me, and like different lighting situations are always so interesting. So I can't help but be drawn to like usually very colorful things or a lot of chromatic images. So it's a mixture. I think also I love certain people, and I want to like I just like them for a reason I don't know. So I think that kind of factors into the choosing. I think if anyone has ever made like fan art, that's kind of like the core of like I'm constantly like so interested in these people and I want to do something about it. You know?
Nice. Well, that segues perfectly into my question about your subjects, because it's a mixture, right? People that you're very close to, and then people who might be perfect strangers. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about who we're looking at here.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of family members. This is my twin sister on these FaceTime calls. And then I have two friends over there, the big FaceTime TikTok, so most of the people I don't know. There's maybe a few celebrities, a few like major characters of TikTok or something like that. So it's a mixture, but I think what was interesting about this show was how the scale was changing. I think I'm mostly known for working very small, but I think something was happening where I was like, maybe the scale increases as, you know, the relationship is larger or something, and so that's how I end up with a big Adam, I guess. Or maybe scale is time spent, because when I look at these TikTok scrolls, everyone is equally sized. You know, celebrities and individuals and all these things. So everyone is there's kind of an equality of the gaze, I would say, which maybe is, you know, maybe that's my distance from them or something. I don't know. But the live streams are large too, and I was thinking about that because I just make decisions when I think about them later. And the live streams are such a different kind of content because they are less curated, and they are long form. So people are live streaming for hours on end, and so it's a little bit more of a curious like content creation. So they maybe are doing extreme things more frequently because they have to maintain attention over a longer period of time. So I found myself spending a lot of time with the live streams, engaging, commenting. Sometimes I would be the only viewer, and that was always really funny because it feels like I'm just alone with this person in a room. So I was thinking about the scale there, and I was like, I'm spending more time with them, just like processing them, engaging. So it was very curious. And I was also live streaming myself as I painted those live stream paintings. So, you know, I was, and that's how the followers of the painting on the right, the pink painting, he live streams 24/7. And so when I was painting him, all of his fans recognized him and flooded the live stream. They were like, Steve has to see this. They were so excited. And Steve, the guy pictured, he eventually joined, and he sent me like TikTok money, and they were all very excited. So I was very happy to, you know, dip my toes into this like strange world a little bit and be welcomed. So I think I definitely want to explore that more, maybe collaborate further, because it is a very unique space and it's very different. And I think that's what's interesting about a lot of these paintings is that, like, in their form, they look very similar. You know, they're on wood, they're all, you know, generally rectangular, but the context with which we are receiving all these images is so different. Like, me experiencing a FaceTime is really intimate or playful, whereas this maybe is sometimes more surreal. So, but they're all happening in the same space, the space of the phone. So it's a hard thing to like organize or reckon with as someone who's dealing with all these images. They're so charged in their own ways. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the live stream for people who are not familiar with this platform. So I'm specifically curious about her, the sleeper.
The sleeper.
Yeah, can you describe what each one of these
Yes.
influencers, I guess we could call them, are doing?
Yes. So this woman in the green, she set up a live stream. She basically set up a scene. So there are these two ghostly figures behind her sleeping, and it's this green filtered camera, almost as if it's like a night vision camera. And so she set up a live stream, and people are responding, and they're like, "There's a ghost behind you! Like, you have to wake up!" And so, like, she gets all these viewers engaging with the live stream because it's like a very frightening scene. She's kind of set up her own little narrative, her own little world, and she's just fast asleep. So it was very unique to see people like presenting like surveilled versions of themselves or something. And what's funny too is I think she's a family influencer. So she shares like stuff about her family. That was really, I'm still really like confused about that and curious about it. But this one is weird because I stretched the image. So I think I'm gonna play with that in the future. Beginning to distort these images as they become. It's interesting because the space still feels convincing, at least to me. I don't know, despite the stretch. So I don't know. I think that's something I would play with as well. And then these two, the guy on the left is a personal trainer, and I think he's just like constantly flexing on the live. You can see he's in his like garage workout center, and then his name's Tony. And then on the right we have Steve, who is an ASMR artist. So he has the mic, he's tapping his nails on the mic, he's making all these weird sounds, he's saying weird things. It's visually very overwhelming. And I was thinking too, watching Steve, the buttons and the comments are all so complex and overwhelming to see. So I really wanted to capture that too because the interface is so dynamic and interesting for the live streams. Because if you pay like a certain amount, a sticker will like appear on their heads. So that's that little part. Which is so interesting that you could pay to adorn this stranger. And you know, I don't know, it's very strange. But the interface was especially interesting for him because it was such a stimulating image.
And so you've had dialogues virtually with a lot of these subjects that may be strangers to you. Is that the case with everybody you don't know?
Not with everyone. Though for this wheel, everyone who is in the wheel we have like engaged with since painting them. So a lot of them I have just now we just have this strange little relationship because of this painting. And it's minor, but it's still interesting. And I think a big goal of my painting is to kind of just like tap at the glass a little bit and, you know, just trying to see, you know, I understand that people are real online and I want to begin to access them. You know, I want to like take them out almost.
Right.
Because I think for TikTok especially, I see it as like this overwhelming, like all these beginnings almost, access points to the world that are just beginnings or slices or something. And so I think I get really like excited about that. And facing an individual is one of the most interesting things to do. So I think I always paint people because I'm always searching for like an interaction or like something more.
And it almost seems like by painting them or drawing them, there's a form of intimacy that's being forged with you.
Yes, and I think too it's interesting because painting is understood as like this labor, and so I think that's what also changes the interaction is like, oh, you've spent time with this. It's like, I think it also changes. It's like an exchange or something more evenly, but
Well, speaking of intimacy and art, I wonder who your influences are.
yes. Well, just in terms of painting technique. someone after that. And as I was looking at the painting, I was like, it's working. I'm here, you're right in front of me. You're living on through my vision almost. And so I kind of was just thinking about painting as some kind of afterlife too. And so I think all images have this kind of morbid quality. But in painting, you really realize it. Like I feel like in painting sometimes, I don't know if other painters experience this, but I'll be painting and it suddenly feels very ancient. Or, you know, when I'm finished, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a very scary feeling because you're accessing a time where you don't exist and the image exists without you. So it's a really weird space, and I was feeling that when I was looking at these images. But after coming back from the afterlife, I'm like, oh, I love living. So I think painting is always functioning like that for me, is like dipping me back into this space, this strange space of preservation, and then it scares me.
Oh, fantastic.
So I think it's interesting that people also kind of disregard social media experiences sometimes when they are, you know, I was just seeing a woman post about her husband who had died, and she posted this very long caption, and she was saying, you know, it's so unfortunate that we choose to appreciate and, you know, list out all these reasons we love someone after they've died. And especially I was thinking with David Lynch's death and how, like, people have just been pouring so much love for him. And so I was thinking about that too, like how these images will be charged with something after. So, title! So it's interesting because these paintings themselves and their creation are very playful and spontaneous, but I'm still thinking about all this stuff. And I think images produce the same morbid nostalgia sometimes. But we make them so much that I think we forget it. So I think painting has changed how I engage with that a little bit.
One thing that is also present in this show are these wall relief moments.
Yes.
So I wondered if is this the first time that you've done this?
Yes.
Okay, so how can you talk about that a little?
I work at American University, and I work in art handling, so I'm working with museum walls a lot. But there was also an artist, Naomi Lee, who did a performance piece where she was putting a spackle over and over again on the wall in these like blobs. And I was so surprised that the spackle held its form through this application. She was really just and so when I saw that it held its form, I was like, this is such a great sculptural tool. So that's when I was thinking about this title. I wanted it to be indulgent, I wanted it to be ornate, and I was thinking about using a wall vinyl, which is just traditional wall text sticker. I was like, that's going to be so expensive. So, and then I thought, okay, I could paint it, and I was like, oh, it's going to be flat. Who likes that? So that's how I arrived at this sculptural carving with the spackle. And I began in my studio with the text, I am love, from the movie. And that was when I was like, that's beautiful. I'm going to do this forever now. So it was a really beautiful revelation for me to also use my whole body to create and form this text. And for it also to be kind of, to engage the wall a little bit more, and also for us to realize that the wall is some kind of image interface as well. So it was very beautiful to come to that experience. And so it's really making me change how I engage with this space too.
Okay. So then, I will ask my final question, and then I think we can probably open it up.
Yeah.
But this has been a fraught time for TikTok as a medium, right?
So true.
And
Yes.
I know, so unfortunately, I don't have slides I could show of this, but I was really intrigued by an image that you had made, I think in 2011,
Uh-huh.
of a series of students, young people like you, who were just all together in a room, right, looking at their phones.
Oh, yes.
And the tone of that image sort of sent a message of like, look at how isolated everyone is, despite the fact that they're interfacing with their phones in the same space. And that seemed to have a really pointed kind of commentary on
Yes.
the digital space.
Mhm.
But here, the tone has shifted completely, and it's almost as though your relationship with your phone and with social media has shifted and changed.
Yes.
And now, we experienced almost the 14-hour death of TikTok.
Yes.
Right?
Short-lived.
So, a 14-hour death, who knows what will happen next. But some of these objects took on a different life during that time, right? So could you talk a little bit about what
Yes.
happened in that time frame and what your relationship might be to the platform as
Yes.
we're going through all of this?
Yes, so this wheel specifically, which is usually rotating, there are 8 paintings on the inside, and each painting is a TikToker user, and I posted a TikTok for each person painted. So I was engaging and sharing this online as I was, painting. So it was kind of a slow burn. I was posting TikToks not very frequently over the course of many months. And then I posted this final wheel in its, its final form, rotating, maybe a week before the ban. Didn't get a lot of traction. And then I posted it again the final day, and it blew up. And people really responded to the work with the prospect of TikTok dying. So I feel like that was so interesting to experience, and the whole tone on TikTok was very much that of like a professional. People were reflecting on their experience, and it was this beautiful, I don't know, it's just people were reflecting, and it was lovely, and they were projecting that onto this work. And there was a comment where someone was like, I saw this last week, and I thought it was about doom scrolling, but now I see it, and I'm like, this is about us, this is about, and I'm like, yeah. So it's really funny. I think half of that work lives online because you can see it being made, and you can see how people are interacting with it as it's being made. And it was for me, it was a part of people faced with the prospect of TikTok ending. And I also got a comment when it came back. It was like, it's so sad you made this for TikTok, or for TikTok dying because it's back. And I was like, I was gonna make it anyway. So it's really funny. I think the dangers of social media specifically are that they kind of force us to think in terms of the infinite, and that is very dangerous because we have limits. This world has limits, we have limits, and to think as if we don't is, I think, very destructive. And I think that's how I enter into these spaces anyway. I'm always thinking, everything's going to disappear, and people need space and reflection from these images in order to reflect on them. So an infinite structure is also one without any greater narrative, and I think that produces a lot of nihilism for people who are engaging with these sites, and that's so destructive. So I think it was interesting to see the perspective on the work change, most outside, inside. So that work specifically, I think, I'm very glad that it was kind of formed at the time that it was, so that I could see how people would respond. And I think people should be maybe more comfortable with things ending And I think the experience of that and the experience of TikTok's like climax or whatever has kind of changed my perspective, I think. I kind of think it should have died, so.
They weren't romantic.
But I have, I've got a lot more work to do, I guess. So, yeah, I think it's been a very interesting way to like bring these paintings into the world.
Does anyone have questions for Marisa?
Yeah.
Online too, just in case.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. And you just were I was thinking about ephemeral versus long-lasting. And so
Mhm.
these are in oil, is that right?
Yes, yes.
So you've chosen this medium, both that's slow,
Uh-huh.
as you were saying, but that will last,
Yes.
versus so much of social media, which seems so ephemeral.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you could talk a little more about that, and
Yes.
when you have captured people that either you know or you don't know, are they happy that you've given them some permanence and some other presence?
So far, they have been. Yes. I think people really, they're very attached to the images they produce of themselves. So me kind of devotionally painting them is also this really interesting interaction. Because it's not just you you're sharing, it's the image of you that you are sharing.
Yeah.
So it's two very interesting things. But for me, I think the material is so important because we treat paintings differently. I paint on wood, and wood is easily affected. It's easily stained. You can even see on the wheel, like the action of this movement is very destructive to the process of this work. And I think it's so lovely to see an image like be affected, because digital images, they don't have there's no way to see that they are decaying or that they're aging, and so bringing them into painting is like this way to, it's funny because it's like a way to give it an end or something, but people preserve paintings for years and years, but that's not really my I'll just reduce them and then, I think most painters like understand this feeling of like, oh, I make the paintings, but like, I throw them around, or like, oh, like my relationship with painting is different than those who make it their lives to preserve paintings. So to me, it's like some kind of control over this image and its lifespan, but what that means after, I don't know. Kate!
What's it like to be an unofficial TikTok representative? Like, I feel like so many people are like, Marisa, TikTok, what is happening? Especially like us, elder millennials who, I'm not on TikTok, but I'm like, Marisa knows about it and I've seen her work, so.
It's so funny because I'm not like really online as some people are, like they're maybe chronically online or something. I'm very much in life and online. So it's interesting. I don't accept that I should be a representative because it's also, I'm sharing images that were catered to me. So I don't want to represent like the universal experience of TikTok, but a work like this maybe would be perceived that way. But it is about, the images that are produced for me. So it is about me in some ways. And it's hard because there isn't a lot of art about TikTok or of TikTok. So it does feel a little like, I guess I'm speaking for the young people or something. But the last day of TikTok, I also saw an artist post a scroll they had printed out in a large format, like memes from TikTok, in this long scroll form. And so I was like, oh, like we're part of the genre. But all of his images were all like brain rot, or they're really like they're just like these like, and these crazy memes and stuff. So we are kind of on opposite ends of the TikTok spectrum, I guess, where I'm one of the people, but they're both two extreme representations of what we experience online. So maybe if I continue to explore this, we can find a balance between the two, maybe. So there are more out there.
There's a question back there.
Hey, you said this really beautiful thing earlier about how there should always be an end to something and how there's a narrative within that, and I think that's a really beautiful sentiment. And I'm so fascinated by your circles and the paintings on the inside and outside of it. And I was curious if you could talk a little more about that sentiment that you said and the circle and the scroll. Because it reminds me of like the loop within TikTok. And I was just curious if you have anything else to say.
It's interesting because, yeah, I've kind of forced them into this like infinite object. I have to look at it. But I think what kind of gives them an ending, especially in this one, is myself. And so I think the insertion of myself is also me realizing that I'm producing my own narrative about this work, which fits into my worldview and which allows me to like continue engaging with it. But yeah, I think I was also just very interested in this form and visualizing this interface as a physical object with a closed loop, because I had been making like this drawing, and my first show was 75 small paintings from Instagram stories, and this produces a measurable distance with which you are like experiencing the work. And so I've always been interested in like what our time with images looks like as a distance. And so I think the final form of that was going to be these shapes which visualize and close this kind of interval of time and this interval of some kind of distance. So I don't know if that answers.
I know that's interesting.
Kind of? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Move on. Yeah?
Just building on what you were saying, it'd be really interesting if you could figure out how to do this with one of those moire strips so that it went inside and outside and came back to
People
itself.
say, yes, I have considered that, the Mobius strip.
Yeah, Mobius strip, thank you.
But then I have to ask myself, why? So,
Just to keep going with the metaphor. So, finite and infinite at the same time.
yes, I know, it's something I've considered, and I also got comments about that, especially when I was making this paper form. I was playing with it to see if I could create some kind of weird states like that. Maybe.
But it sounds like it doesn't speak to what you're actually trying to do with the.
But then, yeah, I have to find like some reason. It's so hard. You know, I could make it and then decide later. So. But one thing I think, moving into the next work, I think what a lot of these images is lacking is more motion embedded in the work. And this is something me and Kyle talked about in like the seminar I don't think through. Motion embedded in these images, which are, you know, constantly moving themselves. So I've moved the still images. I think now embedding some motion into the painting would be really exciting. So that would be maybe an exploration. But I don't know.
Anyone?
How do you approach the notion? I mean, the human face is so expressive of so many different emotions. I mean, from motion to emotion, I guess is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And how, as you were composing, going through the variety of examples of things selected or not, did you think about the range of human emotions and what you felt needed to be expressed?
Yes, I was thinking about that a lot with the FaceTime paintings specifically, because they are they're weirder and less curated than maybe the TikTok images. We have some control over like what we're sharing online, but with FaceTime, like this is my sister, and it's kind of a strange expression, but I love it so much. And then the one of Adam is just like so Also, you could get frozen during a call, and that's a perfect opportunity. So, you know, more to come for sure for those. But, yeah.
I saw one more question. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the relationship between like the drawings that aren't of people
Yes.
in this exhibition, and if you see them as like similar approaches or like different approaches. Like in the
Yeah,
exhibition.
so the drawings are weird. Okay, they're not people. But these drawings are of spackle application where I formed the buttons from an interface, specifically from Steve's live stream buttons. And I literally formed them with spackle in my studio. And then because I can't move these, you know, now it's glued to the wall basically. I was like, okay, I want them to move, and with the I Am Love, that was my first spackle test. And my initial impulse for drawing it was like, I want this in my room, I want this in an intimate space where I can like see it every day and I can be like, oh, yeah. So it was a desire to like move something that was now like very stable, which they're kind of opposite interactions. But I'm really excited for drawing to be like a part of this work as well. And I think for me too, it was really like making everything online more dimensional and like part of the space, a part of my space, as a way to make flatness more interesting. So these drawings are kind of like trompe-l'oeil-esque, you know, they're drawings of things that are on flat surfaces. So, you know, I see some overlap, but yeah, flat surfaces.
Yeah, I'm curious, building on his question, you're translating a millisecond by millisecond remote action into laborious handwork. You're capturing that time in your painting of people who are curating their own presentation.
Yes, yes.
So it's remove.
I know.
And unlike old movies or something where you can see the actors 50 years later and know how time has moved on, these people are curating for the instant, not
Yes.
for posterity necessarily.
Yes.
How do you think about that in terms of the difference between social media and photography and portraiture?
Yes, I think that is so interesting, curating for the instant. And I think it's most interesting because we're doing it at a mass scale. And I think at the very least I want to preserve this strange way of presenting ourselves. Maybe it's not strange, but because I think everyone who's taking photographs and sharing, they're engaging with this history of images. And so it kind of makes everyone kind of a painter in some ways. But I feel like it's in many ways it's not studied. It's not, well, maybe it is in small spaces. But I think it's a huge pulse of like image creation. And so I really am just compelled to make sure people are aware of this strange interaction almost and documenting it, archiving, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe 30 years from now we'll look back and be like, well, that's how people were posing that. Like that was
Well,
the thing.
and that's what was happening like the last day of TikTok. People were posting TikToks from the first few months, and you could see already how people changed in the way they like are presenting themselves. And the interface changes, so yeah, it's constantly shifting. Yeah.
All right. Well, so much. Thank all of you. Marisa partnered, the Museum of Contemporary Art Arlington partnered with Wagamama, which is a restaurant that is actually located right in Clarendon, and Marisa has made their placemats. So if you want to go and have a meal there, you can see Marissa's work there. We also have catalogs from the show, lots of them. So if you'd like one, we can get you downstairs to the front desk. But thank you for being here. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
That was great. I'll definitely visit, for sure.
I know,
Got a lot
many
going on
hours.
this semester, but also you just put a lot of my student team.
And we need an outfit change for the occasion. We always like crazy, or I guess it's our
I don't know how to stop it. If you have to press like something.
Oh my gosh, people were joining.
There's a lot of people.
Well, I just wanted to say good job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be at
Enjoy the talk. You gotta let me know how it goes for sure.
Yes, I will.
I'm excited.
Amazing. Oh.
Did you get